Welcome back to another thrilling countdown. When we talk about the biggest boy band in history, we picture shattered records and untouchable superstardom. But behind that fierce choreography, there are 7 men who share a bond so unbelievably fragile with you that a single fan chant can break their walls down in seconds. Have you ever wondered what happens when the stadium lights dim and the glowing purple ocean takes over? Who among these megastars is the absolute first to let his guard down, choking on his tears the moment he locks eyes with ARMY? Who tries desperately to hold it back but fails every time, and who just surrenders completely to the uncontrollable sobbing? Prepare your tissues and brace your hearts, because we are about to uncover the deepest, rawest truth right now. Number 7. RM, the unbreakable pillar, crumbles. When you think of Kim Namjoon, you immediately picture the unbreakable leader, the genius brain with an astonishing IQ of 148, the incredibly eloquent spokesperson who confidently stood at the United Nations podium addressing global youth, and the fearless underground rapper who fiercely fought his way to the top of an industry that initially rejected him. But beneath that imposing, almost intimidating aura of stoic strength lies a heart so unfathomably tender and deeply reflective that the sheer magnitude of ARMY's unconditional love can shatter his carefully constructed walls in a matter of seconds, making his emotional breakdowns some of the most gut-wrenching, powerful, and absolutely unforgettable moments in the entire history of BTS, because he tries so incredibly hard, so desperately to hold it all together for the sake of his 6 younger brothers. As the designated pillar and foundational core of the group, RM has always carried an invisible, soul-crushing weight on his broad shoulders, a massive psychological burden that began long before their official debut, when he was just a struggling, anxious teenager making a life-altering, monumental choice in a hidden camera prank where Bang Si-hyuk ruthlessly tested his loyalty, asking him to choose between a highly promising, lucrative solo career or sticking with the chaotic, struggling, deeply uncertain project called BTS. And without a single heartbeat of hesitation, without even a fraction of a second of doubt, Namjoon immediately answered BTS, forever sealing his fate as the eternal protector, the shield, and the guiding compass of the group. Yet this very sense of overwhelming responsibility is exactly what often forces him to relentlessly swallow his own tears, to bite his lip until it nearly bleeds, and to stand tall like an immovable mountain while the other members openly sob and collapse into each other's arms on stage, just like during their historic, completely monumental first Daesung win for Artist of the Year at the 2016 Mnet Asian Music Awards, a night where the entire K-pop landscape shifted permanently, and everyone, from a fiercely crying Jimin to a deeply overwhelmed Jin, was dissolving into literal puddles of tears. But RM heroically took the microphone, his hands gripping it tight, his deep voice trembling with the violent force of 1,000 suppressed emotions, yet remaining fiercely firm, his sharp eyes glistening intensely with unshed tears, and delivered a masterful speech that would echo through the annals of music eternity, thanking ARMY with every fiber of his being, before finally quietly allowing a solitary, heavy tear to fall, only when the harsh broadcast cameras finally panned away from his face. However, the true, raw, terrifyingly beautiful, and completely unshielded emotional vulnerability of Kim Namjoon is spectacularly unleashed when the blinding stadium lights finally go down, the deafening roar of the crowd shifts into a harmonious hum, and he is left standing utterly alone in the dead center of the vast, glowing, mesmerizing purple ocean, completely stripped of his formidable leader title, stripped of his fierce stage stage personas and left only as a 20-something human being named Kim Nam-joon, who is profoundly, deeply overwhelmed by the absolute miracle of his own existence and the heavy crown he wears. A breathtaking phenomenon most visibly and heartbreakingly captured during the legendary, unforgettable finale of the Love Yourself, Speak Yourself tour in Seoul in October 2019. An entire massive musical era that was heavily built on his own deeply personal philosophical musings about grueling self-acceptance, navigating crippling depression, and finding healing in a chaotic world, where during his final ending meant the usually hyper-articulate and hyper-composed musical genius completely and totally lost his brutal battle against his own spiraling emotions, his deep voice cracking violently and shattering as he confessed his deepest, darkest insecurities to the tens of thousands of weeping fans in the stadium and millions worldwide, wiping his face repeatedly and aggressively with his large hands as heavy tears streamed down his cheeks like a catastrophically broken dam, admitting with devastating honesty that he once truly hated himself, that he didn't know how to even begin to love himself, but it was ARMY who reached into the suffocating darkness, grabbed his hand and taught him how to survive, how to live, and how to embrace his flaws, sobbing openly and bowing his head as he tearfully proclaimed, "I wish there was a much better word than I love you, but I really, truly love you." A moment so unbelievably intimate, raw, and fiercely unprotected that the entire Olympic Stadium wept with him, feeling the agonizing, transcendent beauty of a man who agonizingly pours every single ounce of his bleeding soul into his complex lyrics in masterpieces like Mono and Indigo, only to be miraculously saved by the very people who sing those exact lyrics back to him in perfect harmony. This is the profound, paradoxical beauty of RM's tears. They are never just simple tears of sudden, fleeting sadness, but rather the explosive overflowing of deep philosophical reflections, years upon years of fiercely suppressed anxieties as the group's designated English speaker, who constantly acts as a diplomatic shield against international xenophobia and grueling media pressure. The haunting, painful memories of their dark, uncertain rookie days, when they desperately handed out promotional flyers to strangers on the sunny streets of Los Angeles, just begging people to come to their free showcase, all violently and beautifully colliding with the blinding, surreal reality of massive global stadiums packed with millions of devoted people who passionately chant his name like a sacred prayer, making his crying moments feel overwhelmingly heavy, incredibly sacred, and so profoundly earned that watching him cry feels like witnessing a deeply private, spiritual cleansing taking place on a global stage. We see this total emotional surrender time and time again, woven intricately through their historic timeline, like when he cried uncontrollably during their very first concert at AX Korea, falling to his knees as he realized his impossible dream was finally truly breathing and alive, or the incredibly poignant, tear-soaked, anxiety-ridden moment during the yet-to-come concert in Busan in late 2022, facing the terrifying, looming uncertainty of the group's impending military enlistment and collective hiatus, where he looked out at the vast, moving sea of synchronized army bombs with red, swollen eyes, desperately pleading with the fans to trust them, to believe in their unbreakable seven-member bond, his usually booming voice entirely stripped of its characteristic bravado, leaving behind only a desperate, aching, beautiful sincerity that sharply pierced right through the hearts of millions across the globe, forcing us to intimately witness the mastermind behind the biggest group in the world dissolving into a boy who is just endlessly grateful and fiercely terrified of losing the magic they built together. He is the ultimate anchor that bravely keeps the BTS ship from sinking into the dark abyss of the ruthless entertainment industry. But when the massive, unyielding storm of ARMY's unconditional love hits the stage, breaking through his intellectual defenses, even the heaviest, most resilient anchor is violently swept away in the beautiful current. And seeing Namjoon finally break down and cry is exactly like watching an ancient, sturdy mountain suddenly crack open to reveal a blazing, blinding core of pure, unadulterated gold, an experience that proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that his tears are a profound testament to the unbreakable, deeply symbiotic lifeline between BTS and their fans. A love so remarkably deep, it literally rewrites music history every single day. But if the unshakable, brilliant, mountain-like leader reacts this intensely and beautifully to the overwhelming power of the Purple Ocean, who could possibly be next on our thrilling countdown? A member whose tears fall with a completely different kind of heartbreaking innocence and wears his highly sensitive heart so violently on his designer sleeve that he can barely manage to sing his own vocal lines when the massive crowd sings along in perfect harmony. Number 6. V, the innocent soul cracking under the purple sky. When you gaze into the strikingly beautiful, incredibly expressive, and universally admired eyes of Kim Tae-young, famously known as V, you are instantly captivated by a man who possesses an almost dangerous, otherworldly level of stage presence, effortlessly shifting from a fierce, intimidatingly charismatic performer who can command tens of thousands of screaming fans with a single sharp gaze into an impossibly soft, deeply affectionate, and astonishingly innocent soul who feels every single emotion at a frequency so raw and vibrating that it becomes utterly impossible for him to hide his fragile heart when the overwhelming wave of ARMY's love washes over him. Tae-young is the brilliant artistic mastermind who famously gifted the world with the iconic phrase "Borahae," or "I purple you," during a fan meeting in November 2016, spontaneously gazing out at a magnificent sea of glowing purple lights and redefining an entire color to mean trusting and loving each other for a very long time, cementing a profound, eternal language that only BTS and ARMY share. But it is precisely this immense, boundless capacity for love and this profound philosophical depth that makes him completely and totally defenseless against his own spiraling emotions when he is standing right under the blinding stadium lights. Unlike RM's heavy, deeply philosophical tears, Tae-young's tears are born from a place of pure, unfiltered innocence, spilling over like a child who is just so profoundly moved by the breathtaking beauty of the world that he simply cannot contain it within his physical body, a heartbreakingly beautiful vulnerability that was forever engraved in the history of BTS during the agonizing, tear-soaked night of the third muster at the massive Goshok Sky Dome in 2016, a moment that completely shattered the hearts of every single person watching when V, usually the bright, mischievous mood maker of the group, stood on stage with violently trembling hands, a quivering voice, and tear-filled eyes to reveal a devastating, tragic secret he had been quietly carrying all by himself during their grueling promotions for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. With heavy tears aggressively rolling down his perfect cheeks, he confessed that his beloved grandmother, the incredible woman who had practically raised him for 14 years and who loved him unconditionally like her own son, had unexpectedly passed away while he was away working in the Philippines, and he broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as he explained how he desperately wanted to shout his love for her on national television when they won first place on Music Bank, but the timing was tragically snatched away from him, an agonizing, deeply intimate confession that showed just how fiercely he relies on ARMY as his ultimate safe space, his ultimate sanctuary, trusting the fans enough to bare his bleeding, grieving soul in front of thousands, while his brothers Jimin and Jungkook immediately rushed over to embrace his trembling frame in a massive, tearful back hug that proved their unbreakable, eternal bond. This intense, magnetic sensitivity is precisely what makes V's emotional moments so incredibly magnetic and devastating to witness, because he does not cry silently, he cries with his entire being, his face scrunching up, his lips pouting in that endearing signature boxy smile turned frown, and his deep, soulful baritone voice cracking completely, utterly incapable of masking the hurricane of feelings inside his chest. best, just like that absolutely legendary, goosebump-inducing moment at the historic Wembley Stadium in London during the Speak Yourself tour, when the massive crowd of 60,000 fans secretly conspired to surprise the boys by singing the chorus of Epilogue, Young Forever, in perfect, thunderous unison. The very second that massive angelic choir of armies echoed through the iconic British stadium, Taehyung completely froze in his tracks, his wide eyes immediately turning glossy as the sheer magnitude of the moment hit him like a violent physical blow, and he simply broke down, crying so incredibly hard into his large hands that he could barely even look at the crowd, utterly paralyzed by the monumental realization that this little boy from a humble rural farming family in Daegu, who once innocently thought that carrying a luxury bag made him successful, was now standing on the exact same sacred historic stage where Queen once performed, being serenaded by tens of thousands of beautiful foreigners singing in perfect Korean, a moment of such pure, unadulterated musical magic that V wept openly and unapologetically, later admitting that he thought he would never ever be able to forget the shock and beauty of that specific sound for as long as he lived. We see this profound emotional transparency every single time he performs his soul-stirring solo tracks like Stigma, Singularity, or Inner Child, where he pours his literal blood, sweat, and tears into the microphone, beautifully channeling his past traumas, his hidden member anxieties, where he was kept a secret from the public until the very last minute before their debut, sitting completely alone and crying by the trash cans while watching his members film their logs, a terrifying isolation that scarred him deeply, but eventually molded him into the fiercely loyal brother he is today. It is exactly during the highly emotional closing moments of their sold-out stadium concerts, when the magical, comforting track Mikrokosmos begins to play, and the stadium turns into a glowing, twinkling galaxy of a million stars, that Taehyung's defenses completely crumble into stardust, his eyes fiercely scanning the massive crowds from left to right, desperately trying to lock eyes with as many fans as humanly possible, memorizing their faces, storing their warm smiles in his expansive photographic memory, as heavy, silent tears steadily stream down his face because he is just so overwhelmingly, fiercely terrified that this beautiful dream might one day vanish, and he wants to fiercely protect this profound connection with absolutely everything he has. He is a man who literally wears his highly sensitive heart on his designer Gucci sleeve, a stunningly gorgeous enigma who deeply loves jazz, classical art, vintage photography, and playing the saxophone, but whose absolute greatest and most prized masterpiece is the unbreakable, intensely emotional bond he shares with the people who stood by him when he was just a scared, hidden member of a struggling, unknown rookie group from a nearly bankrupt agency, constantly proving over and over again that beneath the insanely expensive clothes, the high-fashion ambassadorships, and the record-breaking global fame beats the gentle, innocent heart of a winter bear who simply wants to be loved, and who relentlessly returns that love with a fiercely emotional intensity that leaves millions of fans completely breathless, weeping, and forever purple-blooded. But as we desperately wipe away our own hot tears and prepare to move even further down this intense emotional roller coaster, we absolutely must brace ourselves for an even more unpredictable, violently explosive kind of crying, because if V cries with the pure artistic innocence of a deeply moved soul, who is the member waiting to absolutely wreck us at number 5? A man whose tears are so unbelievably rare, so fiercely guarded behind a thick, icy wall of sarcasm, savage bluntness, and quiet genius, that when he finally completely shatters and falls to his knees on stage, the entire world stops spinning and cries with him. Who is this brutally honest rap god who secretly hides the softest, most fiercely loyal heart in the entire music industry? Number 5. Suga, the Savage Ice King, melts completely. When you look at Min Yoongi, globally feared and revered as the savage, unapologetic rap genius Suga and his fiercely aggressive alter ego August D, you instantly see a man coated in indestructible titanium armor, a brutally honest producer who famously spits fire, casually roasts his own members with absolute precision, and hilariously shuts down invasive interviewers with his signature deadpan humor. But beneath this fiercely cultivated, icy exterior of extreme stoicism and untouchable swagger beats the most profoundly fragile, painstakingly empathetic, and fiercely loyal heart you will ever find in the grueling, cutthroat music industry, making his extremely rare emotional breakdowns some of the most shocking, intensely visceral, and absolutely ground-shifting moments in the entire cinematic universe of BTS. Yoongi is the absolute definition of a survivor, a young boy from Daegu who literally starved himself just to buy cheap musical equipment, desperately choosing between taking the 2-hour bus ride home or eating a meager bowl of black bean noodles, fighting every single day through crippling, suffocating waves of depression, social anxiety, and a terrifyingly dark period where even his own parents firmly opposed his musical dreams because they desperately wanted a stable, secure, and predictable life for their son. A heartbreaking lack of support that fueled his relentless, aggressive drive to succeed, but also left a massive, agonizing void in his heart that he desperately tried to fill with fierce underground rap battles and grueling, exhausting part-time jobs as a delivery boy to pay his school tuition. It was during one of these grueling delivery shifts in the pouring, freezing rain that a horrific motorcycle accident completely shattered his shoulder, a devastating, life-altering injury he frantically hid from Bang Si-hyuk and the Big Hit executives, terrified beyond belief that they would instantly kick him out of the highly coveted debut lineup. Secretly enduring agonizing, blinding physical pain for years while perfectly executing the most intense acrobatic hip-hop choreography on massive global stages, silently swallowing his physical and mental agony because giving up on BTS was simply not an option in his fiercely stubborn universe. Yet this seemingly impenetrable, fiercely guarded fortress of a man completely, utterly, and devastatingly collapsed during the emotionally charged finale of the historic HYYH onstage epilogue concert at the Olympic Gymnastics Arena in May 2016, a monumental venue that was the ultimate, impossible dream for every single rookie idol in South Korea. On that incredibly fateful, tear-soaked night, as the massive, glowing stadium roared with the deafening, earth-shattering love of thousands of devoted armies, the savage, unbothered rap god was slowly scanning the vibrant, energetic crowd when he suddenly, miraculously spotted his parents sitting in the audience, the very people who had once fiercely rejected his impossible dreams, now finally, proudly watching their son conquer the absolute pinnacle of the competitive music world. And in a fraction of a second, the titanium armor completely shattered into a million dazzling pieces, and Min Yoongi, the fierce August D, literally collapsed onto the hard stage floor, violently bowing down on his hands and knees in a traditional full bow of deep respect and overwhelming gratitude, sobbing so uncontrollably, so incredibly hard, that his entire physical body convulsed with the massive, crushing weight of years of suppressed pain, crippling doubt, and agonizing desperation finally leaving his fragile frame. A moment so intensely private, yet spectacularly public, that every single fan in the stadium felt their own hearts violently shatter alongside his, profoundly realizing that they were witnessing the exact, beautiful moment a deeply wounded boy finally made peace with his haunting ghosts. We saw this incredibly rare, devastatingly beautiful emotional surrender violently erupt once again during the monumental, history-making 2016 Net Asian Music Awards, when BTS miraculously secured their very first Artist of the Year daesong against all impossible odds, shattering the deeply entrenched, seemingly unbreakable monopoly of the massive Big Three agencies, a monumental victory that caused the usually fiercely composed, unemotional Yoongi to completely break down on stage, covering his face with his trembling hands as massive, uncontrollable sobs violently shook his broad shoulders, weeping wildly as the terrifying memories of their dirt-poor, uncertain beginnings beautifully collided with the blinding, triumphant reality of their monumental global success, proving that his tears are never just simple sadness, but rather the explosive, volcanic eruption of a man who literally fought through absolute hell, survived the darkest nights, and finally allowed himself to feel the overwhelming, blinding warmth of heaven. But perhaps the most brutally raw, completely unprotected, and soul-crushing display of Yoongi's hidden vulnerability happened during the historic, intensely emotional finale of his solo August D-Day World Tour in Seoul in August 2023, a profoundly heavy, deeply personal concert series where he bravely stripped away every single layer of his idol persona to confront his deepest, darkest traumas on a massive stage alone. And during the final, emotionally devastating performances of Snooze, Dear My Friend, and Amygdala, the tough, unyielding rapper completely, utterly lost his brutal battle against his own spiraling emotions, his deep voice cracking violently, heavy tears steadily streaming down his face as he choked on his own agonizing lyrics, completely unable to finish his verses as he openly cried in front of his beloved army, visibly mourning his painful past, forgiving himself, and beautifully embracing the terrifying freedom of finally letting go of his deep-seated rage, while the massive, fiercely protective ocean of fans screamed his lyrics back at him, beautifully carrying him through the darkest melodies when he simply could not sing another note. This is the profound, paradoxical magic of Min Yoongi. He fiercely builds massive, intimidating brick walls around his soft heart to protect himself from a cruel, judgmental world. But the very second he locks eyes with an army bomb, the very second he feels the unconditional, fiercely protective love of the millions of people who saved his life, those defensive walls instantly turn to dust, leaving behind a gummy-smiling, incredibly soft, profoundly gentle soul who quietly donates millions to charity on his birthdays without telling anyone, who secretly memorizes the fans' fan chants, and who relentlessly pours his literal blood, sweat, and tears into producing masterful musical pieces that literally save the lives of those battling the same suffocating darkness he once bravely survived. Watching the toughest, most brutally savage member of BTS cry is exactly like watching a brilliant, terrifyingly beautiful meteor crash directly into the earth. It is incredibly rare. It is profoundly shocking. It completely alters the emotional gravity of the entire room, and it fundamentally changes every single person lucky enough to witness it, proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that true strength is not about never crying, but about having the immense, monumental courage to finally let your tears fall gracefully after fighting a grueling, silent war for a very, very long time. But if the savage, unyielding Ice King of the rap line completely shatters into a million beautiful pieces when faced with the overwhelming, intense magic of the Purple Ocean, we must desperately prepare ourselves for the next incredible spot on our thrilling list, because waiting for us at number 4 is a man known globally as a radiant, blindingly bright human sunshine, a fierce, terrifyingly strict dance leader whose beautiful smiles can literally light up massive stadiums, but whose sudden, heartbreaking tears are so violently intense, so loudly devastating, and so unbelievably contagious that when his radiant sunshine finally turns into a heavy rainstorm, it physically hurts the hearts of millions across the globe. Who exactly is this beautiful golden angel, and what incredibly specific, miraculous moment causes his eternal bright smile to completely vanish into uncontrollable, shaking sobs? Number 4. J-Hope, the radiant sunshine eclipsed by a purple storm. When you hear the incredibly vibrant, infectious introduction, "I'm your hope, you're my hope, I'm J-Hope," you are instantly greeted by the dazzling, effervescent energy of Jun Hoseok, the undeniable human sunshine of BTS, who possesses a smile so blindingly bright and a laugh so beautifully contagious that it can instantly cure the darkest of days. But hidden meticulously behind that relentless, boundless optimism and his fiercely demanding, terrifyingly precise role as the group's undisputed dance leader is a remarkably tender, extraordinarily sensitive soul whose tears, when they finally fall, are so intensely visceral and overwhelmingly loud that they can instantly break the hearts of millions across the globe in a matter of seconds. Hoseok is the vibrant, rhythmic pulse that keeps the entire massive BTS machine flawlessly synchronized, a legendary former underground street dancer from Gwangju who sacrificed his entire youth, enduring grueling, bone-crushing practices to achieve absolute, terrifying perfection on stage, often transforming into a strict, eagle-eyed dance captain who strikes pure fear into the hearts of his members with a single sharp gaze if a single foot is out of place. Yet the profound, beautiful paradox of his existence is that this very same fiercely intimidating performer is also the absolute quickest member to be reduced to a violently sobbing, trembling mess the very moment his fragile heart is touched by genuine affection, beautifully exposing the incredibly soft, deeply affectionate boy who desperately needs love just as much as he constantly radiates it. This breathtaking vulnerability was brutally, unforgettably exposed during a legendary tear-soaked moment in their early rookie days, when the members and staff flawlessly executed a cruel but brilliant hidden camera prank for his birthday, sitting him down in a dark, cramped room to watch a seemingly ordinary video message that suddenly, shockingly transitioned into a deeply emotional, tearful message from his beloved parents, the very people who had sacrificed absolutely everything to support his impossible dreams. And the exact second his father's warm, familiar voice echoed through the tiny room, Hoseok's bright, signature smile instantly collapsed into a devastatingly raw, ugly cry, his entire body shaking violently as massive, heavy tears cascaded down his cheeks, a deeply intimate, heartbreakingly pure reaction that proved just how profoundly attached he is to his roots and how the immense, crushing pressure of their uncertain, struggling debut era was quietly breaking him inside. But the true, world-stopping magnitude of J-Hope's emotional fragility spectacularly erupted during the historically devastating, utterly legendary 2018 Mnet Asian Music Awards in Hong Kong, a night that will forever be violently etched into the minds of every single ARMY on the planet, where BTS miraculously won the massive Artist of the Year Daesong after secretly enduring a highly toxic, suffocatingly dark period of intense mental exhaustion and terrifying internal struggles that almost pushed them to the absolute brink of permanent disbandment. As Hoseok took the microphone, the deafening roar of the massive stadium suddenly faded into a heavy, agonizing silence, and before he could even utter a single coherent sentence, his radiant face violently crumbled, his bright eyes completely flooded with an ocean of unshed tears, and he unleashed a gut-wrenching, agonizingly loud sob that violently shook his entire frame, his voice cracking with a terrifying, raw intensity as he confessed how terribly scared they had been, how much they had suffered behind the dazzling stadium lights, and how desperately he wanted to show the fans a perfect performance while battling his own crushing, suffocating anxieties. Watching the literal human sunshine of the group cry with such devastating, unfiltered desperation was exactly like watching a beautiful, radiant star suddenly collapse into a supernova of pure agony, a moment so intensely painful and profoundly real that members like Jin and Taehyung immediately began weeping hysterically alongside him, profoundly proving that Hoseok is the emotional lightning rod of the group. When he breaks, the entire sky shatters with him, because his joy is their joy and his pain is their collective agony. This intense, beautiful sensitivity is precisely what makes his solo masterpieces like Mama and the incredibly raw, grungy tracks from his Jack in the Box album so deeply, terrifyingly brilliant, as he aggressively strips away the bright, cheerful idol persona to desperately scream out his hidden fears, his grueling journey from the rough streets of Gwangju to the blinding peaks of the Billboard charts, and his fierce, unbreakable love for his mother, who literally worked in a foreign country just to fund his impossible dancing dreams, making every single tear he sheds on massive stadium stages feel like a profound spiritual offering of immense gratitude and haunting reflection. Whether he is crying profusely while watching the beautiful, glowing purple ocean perfectly synchronized to his breathtaking solo performances, completely overwhelmed by the terrifying realization that millions of people genuinely love the raw, unpolished Jun Hoseok just as much as they love the flawless superstar J-Hope, or he is violently sobbing backstage after flawlessly executing an impossibly dangerous, high-flying stunt during a massive global tour, completely terrified of making a single mistake that could disappoint his beloved fans. His tears are a breathtaking testament to his unbelievably pure, fiercely protective heart. He is a man who famously packed his bags and brutally tried to leave the struggling, unknown group before they even debuted, terrified of the uncertain future, only to be miraculously pulled back from the edge by the desperate, tearful pleas of a very young, terrified Jungkook and the fierce, unyielding leadership of RM, who flatly told the agency, "We need Jun Hoseok. We cannot make it without him." A miraculous turning point that eternally anchored his soul to BTS, making him fiercely, violently protective of their magical bond. When J-Hope finally lets his guard down and cries, it is not just a fleeting moment of sadness, it is a violent, beautiful storm of overwhelming passion, a blinding collision of his grueling, exhausting past with his miraculous, history-making present, profoundly reminding the entire world that even the brightest, most powerful source of light in the entire universe occasionally needs the comforting, embracing darkness of the beautiful purple ocean to gently catch him when he finally falls. Number 3. Jimin, the empathetic angel, drowning in perfectionism. When you watch Park Jimin glide across a massive stadium stage with the breathtaking, ethereal grace of a classically trained contemporary dancer, you are instantly hypnotized by a mesmerizing performer who demands absolute, terrifying perfection from himself in every single breathtaking movement, every single high note, and every single fleeting facial expression. But meticulously hidden beneath this fiercely intimidating, flawlessly crafted idol persona is a spectacularly fragile, unbelievably empathetic, and deeply tender soul who is notoriously known as the designated fairy and comforting angel of BTS, making his incredibly frequent and intensely emotional breakdowns some of the most hauntingly beautiful and deeply heart-wrenching moments in the entire history of the group. Jimin is a man whose heart is so incredibly vast and dangerously unguarded that he literally absorbs the heavy, suffocating emotions of everyone around him, often shedding agonizingly heavy tears not just for his own fierce personal struggles, but also violently weeping whenever he sees his beloved brothers in pain, constantly acting as the ultimate emotional sanctuary, who immediately rushes across the stage to fiercely hug a sobbing member, only to completely lose his own brutal battle against his spiraling emotions and dissolve into a trembling, crying puddle right alongside them. To truly understand the devastating gravity of Jimin's tears, you absolutely must look back at his terrifying, incredibly traumatic pre-debut journey, where he was the absolute last member to join the highly coveted BTS lineup with only a meager 6 months of formal training, a grueling, suffocating period of intense anxiety where he was brutally and repeatedly nearly kicked out of the group a staggering 8 different times by skeptical agency executives who cruelly doubted his fit within a hardcore hip-hop group, a paralyzing, haunting insecurity that birthed his extreme, almost self-destructive perfectionism, where he would literally starve himself for days on end and sleep for only 2 agonizing hours on the cold, hard floor of the rehearsal studio, desperately practicing his vocals and dangerous acrobatics until his muscles completely gave out and his throat bled, just to prove his worth to the world and to his own shattered self-esteem. This deeply ingrained, lingering fear of not being good enough for his beloved members or for his fiercely loyal army is exactly what makes his emotional reactions on massive global stadiums so incredibly visceral, unshielded, and explosively loud, completely shattering the collective hearts of millions when he furiously beats himself up over a tiny, microscopic voice crack that literally no one else in the entire stadium even noticed, aggressively apologizing to the fans with heavy, rolling tears streaming down his beautifully flushed cheeks, completely and utterly unable to forgive himself for what his anxious mind perceives as a massive, unforgivable failure. We witnessed this devastatingly raw, intensely unprotected vulnerability erupt beautifully during the breathtaking finale of the historic Wings Tour in Seoul in 2017, where a deeply overwhelmed Jimin completely broke down during his ending ment, his sweet, angelic voice quivering violently as he tearfully confessed how terribly worried he had been about the group's uncertain future, thanking the fans with such a profound, desperate sincerity that he had to physically turn his back to the massive crowd, aggressively covering his tear-soaked face with his small hands as massive, heavy, shaking sobs wrecked his delicate frame, profoundly proving that his immense global fame and shattered Billboard records have never once shielded him from his own fierce, agonizing internal battles. But perhaps the most monumental, globally shifting, and intensely emotional display of his beautiful, terrifying fragility happened during the spectacularly historic Love Yourself tour at Citi Field in New York City in October 2018, where BTS miraculously became the very first Korean act in human history to perform at a massive American stadium, a mind-bending, reality-altering milestone that caused Jimin to completely and utterly collapse under the immense suffocating weight of the historical moment, dropping his microphone and sobbing so incredibly hard into his trembling hands that his entire body shook violently as the deafening, earth-shattering roar of 40,000 passionate American fans echoed majestically into the cold night sky, beautifully validating the terrified, overworked little boy from Busan who once genuinely thought he would never even make it to debut, creating a cinematic, deeply poignant moment that perfectly encapsulated the literal blood, sweat, and tears required to brutally conquer the impenetrable Western music industry. His tears are like a violently beautiful, devastatingly pure rainstorm. They fall without any warning, driven by a hypersensitive, profoundly artistic soul that feels every single frequency of the universe at a terrifyingly high volume, whether he is crying uncontrollably because he is just so overwhelmingly moved by the magical, synchronized beauty of a glowing purple ocean chanting his name in perfect harmony, or he is violently sobbing in the dark, cramped backstage corridors after a grueling 3-hour concert simply because his physical body is in immense agonizing pain, but he is terrified beyond belief of disappointing the fans who waited years and spent their life savings just to see him shine. We saw this incredibly raw emotional depth during the terrifying, highly controversial period surrounding their historic Tokyo Dome concert in 2018, where he bravely stood before thousands of crying fans, his eyes completely swollen and red from heavily weeping backstage, beautifully and gently addressing the massive political storm that had unfairly targeted him, assuring the fans that their bond could never be broken, proving that beneath his soft, fairy-like exterior lies a fiercely resilient warrior who will literally walk through absolute hellfire to protect the people he loves. He is a fiercely loyal, intensely loving man who famously commissioned a custom-made, wildly expensive necklace that literally spelled out ARMY just to keep his fans physically close to his rapidly beating heart at all times. A mesmerizing, terrifyingly talented musical genius who miraculously transformed his grueling, suffocating self-hatred into the beautifully comforting track Promise, deeply pleading with millions of fans to be their own light while he bravely and painfully learned to be his own. Watching Park Jimin cry is exactly like watching a breathtakingly beautiful, priceless stained glass window suddenly shatter into a million glowing pieces in the bright sunlight. It is incredibly painful to witness, it is devastatingly loud, but it is so unbelievably transcendentally beautiful that you absolutely cannot help but weep violently alongside him, profoundly realizing that his stunning vulnerability is his absolute greatest superpower. An intense gravitational emotional transparency that magnetically draws millions of people into his comforting orbit and forever traps them in the beautiful, inescapable labyrinth of his immense, world-healing love. Number 2. Jin, the eldest guardian, shattering the glass mask. When you gaze upon the breathtaking, worldwide handsome face of Kim Suk-jin, you are immediately greeted with an infectiously confident, unbelievably charismatic superstar who practically invented the iconic flying kiss, a hilariously chaotic mood maker who constantly diffuses the thickest, most suffocating room tension with his legendary dad jokes and his unforgettable high-pitched windshield wiper laugh. But hidden profoundly and painstakingly behind this radiant, endlessly cheerful exterior is an astonishingly selfless, fiercely protective eldest brother who has silently carried an unimaginable, soul-crushing burden since the very first day he stepped into a cramped, dusty practice room with 6 terrified teenagers, making his extremely rare but intensely violent emotional breakdowns some of the most shocking, globally devastating and deeply heartbreaking spectacles in the entire history of K-pop. Jin is the undeniable bedrock foundation of BTS, a young man who originally joined Big Hit Entertainment purely as an aspiring actor with absolutely zero background in singing or dancing, brutally forced to practice completely alone late into the cold night, desperately forcing his stiff, unyielding body to bend to the impossible rhythms of hardcore hip-hop choreography, while simultaneously trying to be the comforting, maternal figure who literally cooked warm meals for his younger, homesick brothers using his own meager allowance. And because of this monumental, self-imposed responsibility to act as the group's unshakable anchor, Jin actively and aggressively conditioned himself to never ever cry in public, firmly believing that if the eldest young breaks down, the entire family structure will catastrophically collapse into absolute chaos. For years upon years, he masterfully played the role of the cheerful, unbothered older brother, brilliantly masking his agonizing insecurities, his grueling vocal struggles, and his terrifying fear of being the weak link of the group behind a glittering, blinding wall of exaggerated self-love and brilliant comedic timing. But this painstakingly constructed glass mask completely and utterly shattered into a million agonizing pieces during the historically devastating, permanently unforgettable 2018 Mnet Asian Music Awards in Hong Kong, a night where he stepped up to the microphone and delivered a speech so brutally raw, so terrifyingly honest, and so unbelievably vulnerable that it completely paralyzed the entire music industry and sent absolute shockwaves across the globe. As he stood before the massive, blinding sea of screaming fans, his usually bright, playful eyes immediately filled with heavy, trembling tears, his broad shoulders shaking violently as he took a deep, shaky breath and confessed to the entire world that BTS had suffered such immense, suffocating mental agony earlier that year that they had seriously, genuinely gathered together to discuss permanent disbandment, a terrifying, taboo revelation that instantly caused a massive rippling wave of audible gasps to echo through the arena. And as the horrifying reality of his words sunk in, Jin himself completely broke down, crying so incredibly hard, so fiercely and so unapologetically that his voice cracked in absolute agony, while V violently sobbed next to him, beautifully and tragically exposing the immense, suffocating psychological torture they had silently endured behind closed doors, while perfectly executing massive global stadium tours with fake plastered smiles. Watching the unshakable, cheerful eldest brother cry with such raw, unfiltered desperation was exactly like watching a massive, protective dam suddenly burst open. It was terrifying, it was profoundly loud, and it instantly unleashed a tidal wave of agonizingly beautiful truth, proving that his relentless humor is actually a brilliant protective shield designed to fiercely guard the incredibly soft, deeply sensitive heart of a man who would literally sacrifice his own happiness just to see his six brothers smile. We see this immense, beautiful emotional depth perfectly encapsulated in his breathtaking, tear-jerking solo masterpieces like Epiphany and Awake, where he agonizingly belts out his deepest, darkest fears of not being able to fly as high as the other wildly talented members, crying silently as he plays the piano in front of tens of thousands of weeping fans, desperately pleading with himself to finally accept his own flaws and deeply realize that he is, in fact, absolutely vital, absolutely necessary, and profoundly loved. A grueling, beautiful journey of self-acceptance that makes every single tear he sheds on stage feel intensely earned and magnificently sacred. This breathtaking vulnerability was brutally, unforgettably exposed yet again during their monumental Love Yourself, Speak Yourself tour finale in Seoul, where he stood in the freezing night air, desperately looking at the breathtaking purple ocean, and completely broke down into heavy, uncontrollable sobs, his perfectly structured face completely crumbling as he realized that this beautiful, massive dream he had fiercely protected with his own blood, sweat, and tears for so many years was finally, truly real, and he violently wiped his tears away, intensely frustrated with himself for finally letting his ironclad guard slip in front of the fans he so desperately wanted to just make happy and smile. And who could ever forget the sheer, world-stopping emotional devastation of their final tear-soaked concert in October 2022 during the yet-to-come in Busan Stadium show, a deeply poignant, heavily burdened performance that everyone secretly knew was their absolute final goodbye before plunging into the terrifying, looming uncertainty of mandatory military enlistment, where Jin, fully knowing he would be the absolute first to leave his beloved brothers and shave his head to enter the freezing frontline base, stood before the massive, glowing purple ocean with heavily bloodshot eyes and a quivering lip, desperately trying to maintain his cheerful, worldwide handsome persona, but brutally failing, his voice trembling violently as he spoke about how much he would miss the deafening roar of the fans, how much his throat hurt from his declining health that day, and how fiercely he loved his members. A moment of such pure, unadulterated vulnerability that it completely shattered the hearts of every single ARMY watching, profoundly realizing the immense, suffocating sacrifice he was making to protect the group's legacy. Jin's tears are so unbelievably powerful because they are the ultimate, undeniable proof of his boundless, overwhelming empathy, a man who famously stated that he prefers to absorb the sadness of others so they don't have to feel it, a fiercely loyal guardian who literally drove Jungkook to school, bought them food when they were starving, and stood fiercely between them and a cruel, unforgiving industry, meaning that when he finally allows himself to cry, he is releasing a decade's worth of suppressed pain, immense gratitude, and blinding, unconditional love that he can no longer physically contain within his broad, protective shoulders. Every single time Kim Seok-jin breaks down and cries under the magical, blinding glow of the purple sky, it is a magnificent, heart-wrenching reminder that beneath the iconic, worldwide handsome face and the hilarious, chaotic energy beats the wildly protective, incredibly gentle heart of a man who would literally sacrifice his own happiness just to see his 6 brothers smile.
Number 1. Jungkook, the Golden Maknae, drowning in an ocean of pure gratitude. When you look at Jungkook, the universally acclaimed, terrifyingly talented Golden Maknae of BTS, who can flawlessly execute absolutely anything he attempts, from belting out breathtaking crystal-clear high notes while suspended high in the air to effortlessly breaking massive global streaming records with his mega-hit solo track 7, you are witnessing a true musical prodigy, a fierce, heavily tattooed, pierced superstar who commands the stage with an intimidating, explosive charisma that leaves millions completely breathless. But hidden beautifully and profoundly beneath this incredibly powerful, untouchable pop star exterior is the absolute softest, most fiercely unprotected, and deeply emotional heart in the entire universe. A man who is so unbelievably sensitive and so violently overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of ARMY's unconditional love that he claims the absolute #1 spot on our countdown without a single shred of doubt. Jungkook is a boy who literally sacrificed his entire normal adolescence, leaving his humble home in Busan at the tender, incredibly fragile age of 15 to travel alone to Seoul, terrified and painfully shy, essentially raised by his 6 older brothers in a cramped, dusty dorm where he would secretly wait until everyone was fast asleep just to take a shower so he wouldn't have to interact with anyone. But that crippling shyness miraculously blossomed into an immense, overwhelming, and fiercely loyal love for the members who molded him into the phenomenal man he is today, a breathtaking devotion that he beautifully immortalized in his heart-wrenching solo track, Begin, where he agonizingly confesses that he doesn't have any real sadness of his own, but the absolute only time he feels like he is dying is when he sees his beloved Hayoungs in pain. This profound, boundless empathy is exactly what makes Jungkook the absolute quickest member to completely break down and dissolve into violent, uncontrollable sobs the very second the emotional atmosphere shifts, acting as the ultimate hypersensitive emotional barometer for the entire group, because he simply does not possess a single defensive wall when it comes to his members or his beloved ARMY. We witnessed this devastatingly pure, incredibly raw vulnerability violently erupt during the historically legendary tear-soaked finale of their 2017 Wings tour, where a deeply overwhelmed Jungkook attempted to give his final speech but completely failed, his large doe-like eyes instantly pooling with heavy tears as he aggressively covered his face, sobbing so incredibly hard that his broad shoulders shook uncontrollably, and his voice cracked into a million agonizing pieces, weeping beautifully as he thanked the fans for making his impossible dreams come true, a cinematic, profoundly heartbreaking moment that instantly turned the entire stadium into a massive weeping ocean. But the true, absolute zenith of Jungkook's world-shattering emotional transparency happened during the spectacularly historic Love Yourself, Speak Yourself tour at the iconic Wembley Stadium in London, a night that will forever be violently etched into the fabric of music history, when the massive crowd of 60,000 passionate fans flawlessly executed a secret surprise project, beautifully singing the chorus of Epilogue Young Forever, and the very second that massive angelic choir echoed through the stadium, Jungkook completely froze, his stunning face violently crumbling as he immediately broke down into massive, heavy, uncontrollable sobs, crying so fiercely and so loudly that he had to physically lean against the stage floor, completely paralyzed by the monumental, earth-shattering realization that millions of people genuinely deeply loved him, wiping his tear-soaked face continuously as he beautifully and tragically confessed that he had never ever expected to receive this much love in his entire life. This is the profound, paradoxical magic of Jungkook. He is a heavily tattooed, fiercely independent pop giant who actively dominates global charts and single-handedly crashes massive websites by simply drinking a glass of milk. But the very moment he locks eyes with an ARMY bomb, he instantly reverts back to that wide-eyed, terrified 15-year-old boy from Busan who just desperately wants to make his Hyungs proud and fiercely protect the magical bond he shares with his fans. We see this immense, beautiful emotional depth every single time he bravely goes live on Weavers in the middle of the night, sitting alone in his room, softly singing requested songs for hours on end, and occasionally shedding quiet, heavy tears just reading the beautiful, supportive comments from fans across the globe, beautifully proving that his massive global fame has never once tainted his unbelievably pure, fiercely grateful heart, profoundly evident when he released his deeply personal, self-produced track, Still With You, during the pandemic, a heartbreakingly beautiful jazz ballad where he desperately poured out his agonizing longing to hear the fans' voices again, promising to run to them even if his feet bled. Whether he is violently weeping during the devastatingly emotional final performance of Microcosmos, desperately trying to memorize every single glowing face in the crowd because he is terrified of forgetting the magic, or he is crying uncontrollably on stage during the Mama 2018 Awards when Jin shockingly revealed their near disbandment, clutching onto his older brothers as he sobbed so aggressively that his legs nearly gave out, Jungkook's tears are always a violently beautiful, devastatingly pure explosion of absolute sincerity. He is a man who literally tattooed the word ARMY across his knuckles alongside the debut date of the group so that his fans and his brothers are the very first things he sees every single time he holds a microphone, beautifully and permanently binding his bleeding soul to the very people who saved him from the suffocating darkness of his intense childhood loneliness, proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that his entire existence, his literal blood, sweat, and tears are entirely dedicated to returning the immense, life-saving love he constantly receives from the Purple Ocean.
When the Golden Maknae finally breaks down and cries, it is not just a fleeting moment of sadness, it is a magnificent, world-altering storm of overwhelming gratitude, a breathtakingly beautiful collision of his grueling, exhausting past with his miraculous present, profoundly reminding the entire world that even the most perfect, untouchable superstar in the universe is, at his absolute core, just a boy who loves his fans so incredibly fiercely that his heart literally cannot contain it, leaving millions of us completely breathless, violently weeping, and eternally trapped in the beautiful, inescapable magic of the greatest musical family the world has ever known.